Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this meeting of the Audit Committee. For the benefit of those watching on our YouTube channel, members of the committee are present in the chamber, and these members will be voting on proposals this evening. Other members of the council are also in attendance and or participating via MS Teams, can take part in any discussions, ask questions, but cannot vote. Your attention is drawn to agenda item 1, which sets out the guidance on how meetings will be conducted, including the ground rules. Before we start with the formal business, we will confirm attendance of voting members by doing a roll call. Sally.
Thank you, Chair. When I call your name, please, can you confirm that you are present? Councillor Cannon?
Present.
Councillor Lark?
Present.
Councillor Bishop?
Present.
Councillor Clokey?
Present.
Councillor Hood?
Present.
Councillor Perry?
Present.
Councillor Rose?
Here.
I can confirm we have 7 voting members.
Thank you. There's also officers present in the chamber, and I'd like perhaps they could introduce themselves. Thank you.
Sharon Shelton, Director of Finance and Transaction.
Paul Worden, Chief Financial Services Officer.
Riley, Principal Accountant.
Amanda Riley, Principal Accountant.
Karen Herbert, Deputy Audit Manager and Audit Lead for TNBC.
ACC, here to support Karen.
Joy Uke, Head of Legal and Democratic Services.
Thank you. I see there's a few officers present online. Could they introduce themselves?
Hi everyone, Linda Hibbs, Head of Housing and Health.
Thank you. Item 2, apologies. I don't think there's any apologies. Oh, sorry, beg your pardon. Kevin, would you like to introduce yourself? Sorry.
Hi there, my name's Kevin Holyoke, Counter Fraud Specialist, part of the KCC, but obviously seconded to TNBC for your fraud, counter fraud matters.
Thank you. Moving on, item 2, apologies. I think we're all present here tonight, so there's no apologies and no substitute members. Item 4, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest within the chamber? James.
As always, I am still employed by one of the companies that manages our funds.
Thank you. Minutes of the last meeting. I need to sign those. Can we agree them via general affirmation? Thank you. Right, moving on to the business of the evening. Item 6, local code of corporate governance, and the head of legal and democratic services, Joy Ukadike, will introduce the report and afterwards answer any questions. Joy.
Thank you, Chair. This report informs members of the outcome of the annual review of the local code of corporate governance. There have been just a few changes to the code, nothing substantive, just the fact that we had a new complaints handling procedure from 1st June 2025, which was annual service delivery plan for 2025-26 and a procurement strategy 2024-2026. I know that members did request last year during discussions that literation or information reports be included to demonstrate that checks are undertaken to ensure procedures are being followed and were reviewed to ensure effectiveness in determining the outcome. This is still on my to-do list, as I have had to prioritize the internal audit, which has been taking place throughout the year, which members also requested. And we've had a bit of a challenging year, legal services, but That on. Okay. I know that obviously this is particularly important with the new addendum to DIFA guidance published in May 2025. So this is something that I'll definitely be forward, which will be discussed further. Thank you. Do you have any? So the recommendation, sorry. The recommendation is as per the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Joy. Before we get to the recommendations, are there any questions for Joy? Sorry, James.
Not so much about the content of the report, which is great, but just as at the risk of adding to the very large to-do list, when we publish these in future, would it be possible where we reference other documents to include links to them?
Yes, I noticed actually on Annex 1, the changes that there were actually all helpfully underlined, which is good. There's one actually I just don't know what people may have spotted. I thought it was quite interesting. It's just at the end on page 46. It just states there's a planning advisory service peer review originally due to take place in September. So that's could be an interesting thing to note. Thank you. So moving on to the recommendations. Recommendation 3.1, is to approve the updates and amendments to the local code of corporate governance at Annex 1 and commend it to the council for adoption. Are we agreed? Thank you. Yep. Seconded, James. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Right, moving on. Item 7, Treasury Management performance update, and also the annual report for 24-25. And that's going to be presented by the Principal Accountant, Donna Riley.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. The Treasury report being presented this evening is set out on pages 47 to 71 of the report pack. It provides the outturn position for 24-25 and an update on the current year's investment position to the end of May 2025, and an update on the property funds, which we'll get to. So looking at Annex 4, which is set out on pages 63 to 70, this is the outturn report for 24-25. It provides an overview of last year's activities and sets out the interest generated from the council's investment, which was 3.324 million. Positive variance of 375,000 on the revised estimate. It was expected that we would earn less than the previous year. The previous year was 3.6 million, but even so, there's a healthy return on our investments in a market that's seen an overall interest rate cut of 75 basis points, so 0.75%. Bank of England cut rates in August, November and February, and the market's pricing those rates for around 4 weeks beforehand. So I think we've actually done very well this year. I'm going to move back up the report to page 49, section 5. This is going to set out the performance up to date to the 31st of May. On 5.6, Table 1 provides an overall summary of the investments held at the end of May. This totaled 56.8 million. Over the past 2 months, our investments have generated income 489,000. It's resulted in a favourable variance of just over 89,000 against the original budget. The main drivers of the increase is the bank rate stability. So the bank rate has been slower to reduce, as previously reported, currently holding at 4.25%. Market volatility. So the markets are continuing to react to prevailing conditions. Further rate cuts are swinging between August and September at the moment. However, with inflation still rising, it's expected to peak around 4%. So it's quite difficult to see how the Bank of England is going to justify the rate cuts near term. More likely to be September. That's what we're thinking at the moment. The money market fund performances. So money market funds are still offering rates broadly in line with the bank interest rate. So that's again another positive situation for us. If I go on to 5.14, we're looking at the long-term investments. So I'm going to focus on these this evening. Pages 49 to 51. Table 2 sets out the sales value of the LAPF, so CCLA and Hermes. The funds continue to show a net benefit since inception, 511,000 as at March 2025. So there is a little bit of a variance there because the sales value is at May, but the dividends actually only reported quarterly, so that's up until the end of March. On page 51, table 3 sets out Lothbury Property Fund. So no additional payments have been received since last reported in February. So we still have the 5 payments totaling 1.276 million. As of last month, the updated position of the fund, they've got 5 assets remaining. The total 74 million. So the makeup of the 5 assets is 1 has a sale agreed and the remaining 4 are under offer. An anticipated completion date of August 25. So it's pushed back a little bit further than we expected. The income budget for Lothbury has been removed because the dividends are nominal, which we're receiving. However, they are still generating dividends. To date, we've received £2,000, but we are expecting a further dividend payment by the end of July. Going on to 5.2, Hermes Property Funds. Again, we are focusing on the property funds this evening. They held a further EGM on the 24th of June. Members will remember that they're actually looking to merge. The initial conditions for the rollover and liquidity thresholds have been satisfied, so the resolution was passed. So they're going to be moving forward with the merger. Unfortunately, we will not be moving forward with the merger as we don't satisfy the conditions that they want to roll over. But the proposed date is the 15th of August, at which point we will be pulling out of the withdrawing from the scheme. The fund will only now reach out if other things haven't been satisfied. So if the date for the merger has been pushed back or if there's a condition that will not be met, then they'll reach out. Otherwise, we will be withdrawing on the 15th of August. As at the 31st of May, the net asset value for Hermes investment was just over 900,000 compared to the initial investment of £1 million. Whilst this reflects a potential capital shortfall, it should be noted that the fund has generally accumulated dividends of 266,000 to the 31st of March. The third property fund is at CCLA. So I have provided, and hopefully members have seen the email that went round regarding the CCLA position. So we received an email from them, which was shared with members to advise that they're being acquired by Jupiter Investment Management Group. So this remains subject to FCA approval, but in taking these steps, CCLA believe they're securing their position for the future to allow them to continue to serve the sectors such as local authority. On the actual email, there was also a Q&A section to address any initial queries that members may have. But in short, they will retain their own identity, but they will also have access to wider resourcing and product. They are going to be hosting a webinar in September to discuss the new partnership and provide investors with an opportunity to ask any questions. So if members have any questions, I would encourage them to pass them on and we can actually raise them on their behalf. Moving on to 5.2.3, medium-term investments. And this remains on page 51. The multi-asset investments have generated 36,000 to the end of May, which is approximately £10,000 over the original budget for the same period, providing the annualised return of 5.13%. Finally, I can confirm that Treasury activities have complied with Treasury limits and the prudential indicators 25-26, and there has been no breach to report to members. Thank you. I can take any questions.
Thank you, Donna. Are there any questions? Mark.
Thank you very much for very comprehensive, as always. The Hermes issue, the investment, so we're pulling out of that. So I think you confirmed previously that because it isn't something of our making, there's no exit penalty, is there? We get almost exactly what value of the fund is back. There's no withdrawal fee. There often is for property.
Thank you, Councillor Hood. That is correct. We will not receive any exit.
Anything else? No. I've just got a quick question for Donna. 519, just back to the next question, Lothbury. It mentions break-even point will be achieved with a recovery of £342,000. I mean, have we got some idea where that might be, some figure near there might be achieved, or is it a little bit up in the air?
At this moment, we don't know. They will provide us with a final figure.
Thank you. Any further questions at all? No. Oh, yeah, Tim.
Question is just sort of our thanks really to the Treasury Department, because for the last 3 years, all we've seen is plus plus. It's just going to be very disappointing when the bank rate gets back to 2%, and we're going to be sitting here going, oh dear. But thanks for what we're getting at the moment.
Yes, certainly. I'd definitely echo that. Right, so moving on to the recommendation. Sorry, Mark.
In the wider context of the council's finances, this business with Hermes is actually quite beneficial, isn't it? Is it a time where we want to be releasing some money because we've got capital projects coming up? Actually, this is quite fortuitous, isn't it? That this has allowed us to get to where we want to be without any kind of penalty at all.
Yep, I think we all agree with that. Okay, thank you. Right, moving on to the recommendations on 3.1. We're asked to recommend that Council endorses the action taken by officers in respect to the Treasury management activity for April to May 2025. Note the 24-25 out-term position, and note the current position in respect of the Lothbury Hermes property investment funds. Are we all agreed? Thank you. Oh, sorry, second. Sorry, yes, yeah. The second. Thank you, Mark. Item 8, risk management, and yes, I think it's somewhat of a historic occasion because it might be Sharon's final risk management report to this council. So, Sharon.
It certainly is. Thank you, Chairman. Okay, so in terms of the strategic risk register, there's not been much change. You'll probably have noticed that yourself from looking at the document. And depending on if you're a glass half full or a glass half empty person, it's either good or bad news in that respect. So in terms of the red risks, there were 3 last time, and the same 3 apply now. So if I just talk about them separately, firstly, the savings and transformation strategy. We've kept that as a red risk because as at today, or as at the time we wrote this report, we don't have a list of options for members to implement to enable us to deliver the savings targets that we have. However, at the moment, this is something that I've been working on and will continue to work on virtually until the moment I leave. The Chief Executive and I, with colleagues, Paul, I've got Amanda working on this, Donna was involved, loads of people have been involved on this. We are speaking with every budget holder in the whole council, the directors and other people, and they are all tasked with coming to us to meetings with options that we might be able to assess, refine, analyse, and then in due course present to members as opportunities for you to take. It's very early stages at this point, but that work is underway. So I have a nice feeling that perhaps not next time, but certainly perhaps in January, that risk might be moving in a slightly different direction. So I think that's potentially good news. The local plan, well, I'm not sure what I can say about a local plan. I'm certainly not an expert in local plans, and you are far more expert than I am. But you'll see from the risk register that nothing much has moved since the last time. And obviously, we hope things will be moving as we head towards that deadline date in 2026. But obviously, members will be updated as appropriate. And then the third one, of course, is the managed exit from the Agile system, where we are reverting back to iDocs. I think that's likely to reduce in risk by the next time you meet, although I won't be here then. The transformation manager has now been appointed to project manage that, as well as do some other tasks transformation-wise around the council. There was a slight delay in getting that appointment confirmed, but the person is in place now and is working very hard on this project. So I think things will start picking up with that very quickly. So that's the strategic risk register. Just to mention that you had a Zurich management health check some time ago, and we are working towards those recommendations. In September, Paul will be reporting back to you to finish that whole thing off, close them all down, and also bring back to you an updated strategy for the risk. We were waiting to do the strategy because we wanted to make sure we'd cleared all the recommendations on that health check and build everything into the strategy. But that work is now virtually completing. So that should be closed off in your September. And hopefully you'll be able to approve the new strategy at that point. So for today, it's really just a case of signing the risk.
Thank you, Sharon. Are there any questions at all? Yes, Mark Hood.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Yeah, obviously we've got the carbon neutral aspiration in there. I thought it was a target rather than an aspiration. And obviously later on in the report it talks about the local authority decarbonisation fund drawing to a close, which is a massive problem. But it's, as we mentioned the other night, it's also you've got to praise officers who've managed to bring in so much money through the bids to enable us to get as far as we have done quickly. The local plan is listed as a risk, whether of delivering it, but in all honesty, it talks about reputational risk. I think there's a reputational risk whether we approve a local plan or not, because obviously we get the public are going to see that we're going to have to accommodate a huge amount of unsustainable housing on the green belt. So that's kind of weird, isn't it? That way of looking at it. I'm really pleased to see that the transition away from Agile has got a transition manager there. And we've obviously learned the lesson of heading that way. When we're now coming back, that's going to be managed so we can control costs. And I just want to focus on Annex 2, where we've got a novelty of our finance director appearing as an ongoing risk that's been identified to the council, rather than the huge asset that you've been throughout your career here. So yeah, it's it's frustrating, isn't it? Have we got any idea of the cost of transitioning back from how much it has cost Agile, introducing Agile and going, or is that not admissible in this meeting?
There was a big report to ONS, as you know, and all the data, I can't remember it offhand, and I don't want to say it in public because I'll probably get it wrong. But it's all in a report, and in fact, I think it was. So I won't comment.
Bethan.
It was just about on page, I think it was number 15 under devolution. I just wondered if there were any comments. I noticed the risk hasn't changed in any way, but there is a little red addition here of government funding received and being held by KCC. And I just wondered if anybody viewed the risk or had any comments about how things are going with KCC in regards to devolution in view of the change of the makeup of KCC. I'm assuming it was quite smooth when the council was made up of quite a long term, most people being there for quite a long time, and from the same party as most of the TMBC. Now we've had a complete change and a lot of people are quite new there. I understand. I'm led to believe, but and I wondered whether that in itself posed any issues to the smooth running of things with devolution.
Thank you. I think it's chair.
Trying to be very tactful.
I think it's chair of the audit committee here. I don't know if I'm qualified to answer that particular question, but I don't know if you've got any particular points. I
don't think I should be commenting on that. Politics. All I do know is that yes, we have received the money, and yes, a strategic partner has been commissioned with all partners, involved. So obviously KCC have involved in that and agreed to that. What happens thereafter, who knows what's going to happen, but to date, I don't think there are issues in terms of this stage. But who knows what the future might hold.
Thank you, Sharon. James.
Thank you, Chair. The lovely little words cyber and security. Having sat at home this evening and watched the news and watched an old chum of mine who ran Knights of Old, 500 trucks gone bankrupt, and they got in through one staff member's password, which was weak. Now, we were all given cybersecurity, and perhaps is it time for us to say to all the members, because if they can sneak in through a little back alley, and it could be any one of us, their passwords that week, and they can get in, and the destruction that is wrought. I mean, unbelievable. And I couldn't believe the ages of those who did the M&S, 2 at 18, 1 at 19, and 1 at 20. Quite bright, but obviously going in the wrong direction with their computer skills. But I just wondered if we could need to bolster up and make it a slightly higher risk, because it seems to be the target thing at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, James. I think it's some good points there, and it certainly does seem to be youngsters, as you said, that carry out these sort of crimes. But yeah, absolutely. Any want to comment on that at all?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, I hear exactly what you say. We have worked really hard here. Well, my IT colleagues have worked really hard here to build an infrastructure, network, whatever, arrangements to make sure we are as safe as we possibly can be. But that is not foolproof, is it? Because, as we all know, things can be breached, and can be breached with very simple mistakes, like the one that happened to your, where it was a weak password, I think. And what they call spear phishing is the thing today, which is where it's all very clever. You actually receive an email from someone you're expecting to receive an email from. But it's all very clever because someone has been working in the background, finding out what's going on, and then managing to get in, and almost like impersonating somebody else, and then they're in. And that's what's been happening lately to a lot of the cases where there have been cyber incidents. So you're right, we're not safe. But we do an awful lot to try and protect, which is why we've kept it at amber, but I'm not saying it's a very high amber. Tomorrow evening, actually, if you're interested, the head of IT will be presenting something to the Finance, Property, Regeneration Board, Committee, sorry, Scrutiny Select Committee, on cyber. There is a paper in part 2. If you're interested in hearing about that, then please do listen in. And that's all designed to try and bolster our defences even further.
Thank you, Sharon. Yes, that's a good opportunity for those that also sit on that board. I think there's a few of us in here. Oh.
I didn't
Any further questions at all? No? Okay, let's move on to the recommendation and 3.1. I'll read it out. That's to note the updates to the strategic risk register since the last iteration, particular emphasis on those risks categorised as red, as shown in annexes 1 and 1A, and to note the service risks identified in Annex 2. I'll propose that. Can I have a seconder, please? Yes, Councillor Locke. Are we agreed? Thank you. Thank you. Item 9, the annual governance statement 2024-2025, and that report is to be presented by Paul Warden.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. The annual governance statement is forms part of the statement of accounts, which is the next item on the agenda for this evening. It is agreed by the Chief Executive and the Leader of the Council being the two senior officer, or one senior officer and one senior member for the Council. And earlier in the meeting, you approved the local code of corporate governance for the year. This statement really just gives members the output of what happened. That's why it's included in the statement of account. It is informed by the Council's actions that have taken place in respect of budgetary control, which we report to both Cabinet and to the Scrutiny Select Committee, risk management, which we bring to here, and any issues surrounding fraud. On top of that, we also ask for a declaration from all chief officers to say that their own staff are aware of the Council's financial procedure rules, whistleblowing policy, and other matters that could cause any issues for the governance arrangements within the Council. I'm happy to say that the statement this year has been reviewed by myself and presented, as I said, to both the Leader and the Chief Executive, who approved it, and was included within the statement, which was signed off on the 31st of May this year. I'm happy to take any questions, but I would ask members to consider the recommendation shown at paragraph 3.1. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Are there any questions at all on this? No. Doesn't look like there are. Okay, thank you. Right, we'll move straight on to the recommendation. So recommendation at 3.1, members are asked to endorse the annual governance statement for the year ended 31st of March 2025. I'll propose that. Can I have a seconder, please? Yes. Thank you. Are we agreed? Thank you. Moving on to item 10. That's the draft statement of accounts 2024-2025. And this report is going to be presented by the principal accountant Amanda Riley. Amanda? Oh, yes, sorry, Sharon first. Thank you.
To say, this is the last time that the accounts will be in my name. Next time it will be Paul. But I just really wanted to say what a great team in here and others back in the office. Yet again, they've pulled out all the stops to get done by the 31st of May, which is the very short stop date. So we were given a temporary extension this year, all counts the 30th of June. But no, they ploughed ahead and managed to, as usual, by the 31st of May. So I just wanted to say I think they deserve great congratulations for what they've done, and sure that everything will be in safe. Over to Amanda.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. In Annex 1, starting on page 101 of your agenda pack, you will find a copy of this year's draft financial statements. You'd also all have hard copies as you came into the room to look through. Provide some of the main headlines from this year's accounts. The final contribution to the General Revenue Reserve was in the region of 1.1 million, which was 43,000 more than expected at original estimates. This was predominantly due to the levels of investment income that we were able to achieve last year, alongside increased revenue from our major income streams, as well as business rate funding being higher than we had anticipated when setting the budget. Looking at the more technical side of things and focusing on the Council's balance sheet, which can be found on page 120 in your agenda pack, or page 19 of the hard copy versions, the Council's net worth increased by some 15.2 million in 24-25. This was due to a number of factors, but just to highlight some of the most significant, there was a £3.2 million reduction in the pension liability due to asset returns being higher than expected. Heritage asset values have increased by 4 million. These values are based on the Council's insurance valuations each year. Overall, following this year's valuations of the assets, we have seen an increase in the value of the authority's assets, noting that investment properties have decreased slightly since last year. This year also saw the introduction of IFRS 16, which is the new standard for leases. As mentioned at previous committees, the value of these items was immaterial to the Council's accounts, resulting in right of use assets of 131,000 and a very small liability of just £190 in 24-25. Grant Thornton are making good progress with this year's audit, and the accountancy team are currently busy responding to all their queries, with the aim to conclude the audit ahead of the next Audit Committee meeting in September. To date, they have not raised any significant issues, and I'm hoping that stays that way. If anyone has any questions on this year's draft statement, we're happy to take them. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. Certainly some interesting parts in the report. Pages 114 to 5, you've got section 4, give you some very clear explanation about the financial performance, and section 5, summary review of the year, which makes it certainly of general interest as well. But are there any questions, please? Yes, Tim Bishop, thank you.
On page 66 of the printed one, or 167 on our tablet, it's got a value of funding to other organisations. Where could I find a breakdown? Have a break.
I think we could give you a breakdown of that, I believe, but it isn't published anywhere that I know.
If I can, Chairman, the majority of it is the Leisure Trust, where we provide them with financial support. I was going to say the other amounts are where we have members on the appointed body. So Citizens Advice, if we provide money to, and we have a member appointed to there, it's where our members could have an influence on the running of that organisation, or which they don't actually have, because they are normally either one or two members on a very large board. in the case of the Pleasure Trust, I think it's yourself and one other councillor on a board of, I think, 12 or 14 members. So the influence that we could have isn't considered to be significant enough. Anything that was significant, we would have to then start thinking about group accounts. And I know these two in front of me would love to avoid that if possible. So thank you.
The question.
Thank you. Any further questions at all? Oh, yeah, Mark Hood.
Just want to make ask a question about the valuation of property assets. Because I think it's time. I think it's timely because we're at the moment we've got a consultation about what happens with Tunbridge Town Centre properties, and there's a difference in the valuation that the council would expect to realise, the value that we could realise from some of those plots. And I think it's worth. I think it's worth putting it in the public domain. So I'm going to do exactly that, because there's lots of different options that residents are being provided with. They've been given choices. One of the options is to convert one of the, or rather to sell one of the plots, and then it would become a medical centre. I just think it's worth making the point that if that were to be the case, then there is a financial implication for the council, because what you have is you have a condition on the sale, and then the market value of the property is reduced, so you get less money back. So there is a financial implication in terms of value for money for the council if they go down that option.
Thank you. Sharon, you want to comment?
Yeah, just to say that, of course, assets are valued for the use that they're put to at the current time. And anything can have a different value depending on what use it's put to. And obviously there's planning permissions and all that sort of thing that would have to go alongside that. But yeah, values can vary immensely depending on the use. So what we have here is what we are using those assets for.
Thank you. Any further questions? No? Okay. Well, thank you very much. And so we'll move on to the recommendation, which is on 3.1. That is for us to note and endorse the closed unaudited set of accounts for 2024-25, and note the statement provided by the Director of Finance and Transformation in support of assertions made in the Statement of Responsibilities for the Statement of Accounts. I'll propose that. Can I have a second, please? Yes. Yes, exactly. I'll go the other side next time. Thank you. Are we all agreed? Thank you. Item 11 is the review of the effectiveness of the internal audit 2024-25. And the audit lead, Karen Herbert, will present and introduce this report. Karen?
Thank you, Chair. This report sets out the annual review of the effectiveness of internal audit. The review includes an internal audit assessment of conformance against the public sector internal audit standards, together with an evaluation of the delivery of internal audit services to the standard required by the Council under the shared service agreement. The overall result of the assessment was good. The assessment was provided to management team for review, and opportunity was provided for the team to pose questions to the audit lead in relation to the information provided. Following this, the management team endorsed the assessment for 2024-25 as good. Further information relating to the different assessment ratings that could be awarded can be found on page 190 of your packs. Details of the metrics supporting the assessment are contained in Annex 1. These metrics include conformance against the public sector internal audit standards, the internal audit annual planning process, customer satisfaction survey results, and internal audit key performance indicator outturns. Performance against KPIs has improved since last year. At the time of reporting, 5 out of 6 KPIs have been met. There are 2 particular KPIs that I would like to bring to your attention. The first of these is the time from the end of fieldwork to draft report. This measures the number of audits which have a draft report delivered within 10 days of the end of fieldwork. The report details improvement this year from last year's 71% to 87% this year, and therefore now meeting this KPI, which we didn't last year. This demonstrates the effectiveness and the success of the agile auditing approaches, which have been employed more frequently throughout this last year. The agile auditing approach is included within performance objectives for audit team members and focuses on fieldwork being organised into shorter defined sprints and increased communication throughout the audit process, with findings and issues being communicated when observed rather than waiting until draft report. The second KPI that I would like to draw your attention to is the one relating to audit plan completion. I'd like to provide an update to the information contained in Annex 1, which starts on page 193, which details audit plan completion performance of 85.71% against the target of 90%, 12 audits having been completed and 2 that were in the late stages of fieldwork. I can advise that one of those 2 audits that were in fieldwork at the time of this pack being produced has since been progressed to the draft report stage soon after these papers were finalised, which brings the KPI to above target at 92.85%. Finally, the internal audit KPIs remain due for review to consider whether they remain appropriate measures of internal audit performance and to determine whether they need to be amended or replaced with any new measures. It is anticipated this will be covered as part of a review of the Inter-Authority Shared Service Agreement in place. However, any changes will be brought before the Audit Committee for agreement. Thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Karen. We have a question from Tim Bishop. Tim.
Chair, can you just clarify something? You mentioned that there are sort of ongoing audits through the Agile system. I'm just pleased to know that something's come out of Agile that we're actually pleased about.
If I can just clarify, the Agile system, which is used here at TNBC, is different to the audit methodology. So I'm sorry, but it's the same word, but a false positive, shall we say?
Any further questions at all? No. Okay. Well, let's move to the recommendation. 3.1, which is we're asked to consider the findings of the review and endorse the opinion that the effectiveness of the internal audit function for the year 2024-25 was good. I'll propose that. Could I have a seconder? Yes, that's Councillor Bishop. Thank you. Is that all agreed? Thank you. So moving on to item 12, and that's the internal audit and counter fraud Q4 progress report and annual opinion. And I think again, Karen will lead on that, and we'll hear later from Kevin Holyoake. Karen.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So I'll introduce the internal audit progress report for Q4 and the annual opinion, and then stop for questions. And then after any questions, I'll hand over to my colleague, Kevin Holyoake, to present the counter fraud annual update to you. The report provides a combined update of the work completed during the year, together with an overall opinion of the Council's governance, risk and control framework. Section 2 of the report, which is on page 206 of your packs, concludes that for 2024-25, substantial assurance has been provided in relation to corporate governance, risk management and internal control arrangements. This follows several previous years of a substantial being awarded as the annual assurance opinion. This opinion is based primarily on an evaluation of findings, conclusions, and all assurances from the work undertaken by internal audit during the year, which includes both assurance and advisory engagements. In 2024-25, internal audit have had no scope limitations imposed upon them, and there have been no identified impairments to the independence of internal audit to report. With regards to the work completed during the year, Part 3 of the report, shown on page 208, shows a summary of all internal audit work completed. This includes both assurance and advisory work. Of the 17 audits agreed as part of the plan for the year, 12 are complete or at draft report stage. 2 audits have been deferred to 2025-26. The first of these was the local plan audit, as we're still awaiting updates to legislation which will impact on the local plan and subsequently our audit scope and what we need to provide assurance on. The second audit that was deferred was complaints. This was delayed at the request of the service to allow time for a new complaints policy to be adopted and embedded by the council before we started to review adherence to that new policy. The local plan audit has already been agreed here at the previous committee in April for inclusion on the plan for 2025-26, and the complaints audit is due for discussion over the next couple of weeks as internal audits start to work with management to develop a proposed audit plan for the second half of the year. This second half plan will be presented for approval at September committee. 2 audits are ongoing into 2025-26, these being the Tunbridge Town Centre Review and Gibson Building Project. Both audits have been agreed to adopt an embedded assurance type approach. These are significant projects, and this approach means that internal audit will provide ongoing assurance throughout the project rather than waiting to review activity and then report retrospectively at the end of the project. Engagement plans are currently being drafted for these 2 audits to provide an outlined scope and agreed reporting on progress for 2025-26. The summary details 2 audits are still being at fieldwork stage, these 2 being digital strategies and automation, which experienced some delays at planning stages with officer availability, delaying the agreement of audit scope. I'm pleased to report this audit is now close to draft report stage. The other audit, which I mentioned as still being fieldwork stage, was facilities management and building maintenance. Since these papers were published, that is the audit that has now moved to draft report, and that has been issued with an opinion of adequate. Summaries for both of those 2 audits will be provided in the September reporting pack. Internal audit were also requested during the year to provide additional support in the form of acting as an independent reviewer for TNBC planning applications for significant projects such as the town centre. We have also conducted a further independent review of the Agile system implementation at the request of the Chief Executive. The outcome from this review was published or discussed in private session at recent scrutiny committee, at which the responses to areas raised being of concern were discussed, and I believe they are due to go to the next cabinet meeting. Summaries of all audits completed in quarter 4 are included in Appendix 1, which in your packs is page 224. Please be aware that this includes a summary of the findings from the work undertaken in relation to the Castle project, which inadvertently got missed out of your packs at the last committee. All of the assurance audits completed from the 2024-25 plan, 70% of those have been awarded substantial or high assurance this year, with 20% receiving adequate assurance. There has, however, been one audit awarded a limited assurance opinion. This was temporary accommodation, which identified a number of areas for development, resulting in 5 issues being raised, 1 high, 2 medium and 2 low. Part 4 of the report, which is page 211, provides details of actions due to address risks raised in previous audits. There were 49 recommendations falling due for implementation during the year, of which 25 or 51% we have been able to close. A further 22% are noted to be in progress, but now overdue, and 13 or 27% have been reviewed and new implementation dates agreed with officers based on the progress demonstrated to date and the reasons for non-completion provided. The 51% closure rate is a slight drop from last year. This has been discussed at quite some length with the Chief Executive and Senior Management team, and an action plan has now been developed, which is anticipated will assist in improving this implementation rate. Sections 5 and 6, starting on page 212, set out internal audit conformance with the global internal audit standards. These were released in 2024 and effective from January this year. The report also includes the results of the Quality Assurance and Improvement Programme, which includes the internal audit KPIs, which were mentioned in the previous item. Finally, Section 7 sets out an appraisal of internal audit and counter-fraud resource for 2024-25, detailing that there have been no limitations to resources during the year, with both access to appropriate numbers of adequately qualified and skilled staff and technological resources available. I'm happy now to take any questions on this section before handing over to my colleague for the fraud section of the report.
Thank you, Karen. I should have mentioned that if there are any questions on the audit item regarding temporary accommodation, that Linda Hibbs is available online to perhaps answer, help with that as well. Thank you. So, are there any questions for Tim?
It was about temporary accommodation, because obviously it came up with limited. And I do read the summary of management responses saying I've got some action plans, but nice to know where that's moving, how soon it will see fruition. Thank you.
Thank you. Linda, would you like to perhaps answer that? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, as members can imagine, we are working as quickly as possible on the actions that came out of the audit. One of the key ones is around our invoicing procedures at the moment for temporary accommodation, which basically involve sending out invoices from the council's Integra system. So it's not really an ideal way of invoicing our clients. We would much prefer to have a rent system in place. So one of the key actions is to explore that. And there is a new module coming on our existing housing system, which is called Hume, that we feel may help us with that. Just a word of warning, we are at an early stage at exploring that. There is a meeting booked in next week for a demo, but obviously we want to learn lessons from a previous system, in that we don't want to be the guinea pig for a new system. We want to know that it's robust and it's going to do what we need it to do. And also we need to look at the procurement issues that might come of that and make sure that we're kind of, doing everything we need to comply from that point of view. But that meeting is organised for next week, and that is a key point of moving forwards with the way that we will invoice clients for the rent and the way that we would chase up any debt that's owed to us as well.
Thank you, Linda. Mark, did you have a question? Did you raise your hand? Oh, so is it James Clokey? Yeah, James Clokey. Thank you.
Yeah. I just noticed on page 216 we've got a reference to increasing our utilisation of artificial intelligence in audit planning. Can you tell us a little bit about how we are using AI?
Thank you. Yes, so AI is obviously a tool that is becoming far more widespread in its use. For audit planning, what it helps us to do is to really start to look at the risks that we are expecting to find. the controls that we would expect to find in place, and also to help us develop ideas as to how we can test those controls. That's not the only use, but it's certainly one of the key aspects of audit planning. And as time goes by, we have a working group within KCC's audit team that are looking at data analytics and AI, the potential for both. We are lucky now to have a couple of quite techie people on the team that are really starting to trial things and to say, we can do this. Have we thought about trying this? And the use of AI, again, is something we've embedded into the team's objectives for the year. And we're expecting to utilise it more and more to help us become more efficient in all stages of the process, not just the planning.
Thank you. Any further questions for Karen or James? Sorry, coming back.
I had one other question on page 228 on the annual governance statement that we've just signed off, a perfectly adequate one apparently. What do we need to do to improve that?
I do have the details. If you can bear with me, I can just find that particular report. I haven't got the whole lot memorised, or I can come back to you after the meeting.
I'm all right with you coming back after the meeting. That'd be great. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Mark Hood.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Yeah, thank you very much for a very comprehensive report as always. It's really good. So we're overachieving in the number of training days, and it's specifically the people who you have to work with, or who you have the pleasure of working with at the council. So it's an average of 7, where the target's 5. So that sounds like we're in a very good place, a very healthy place. I'm very reassured that there's an audit, there's going to be an ongoing audit running alongside the work next door, and most importantly, the work in Tunbridge Town Centre, because that's a huge undertaking, and having that running concurrently with it rather than being a retrospective thing is a massive reassurance. So thank you for that.
I think we need to move on to the counter fraud specialist, as in my notes here, and that's you, Kevin. So I'll leave it with you.
Thank you, Chair and members. So I'm going to take the report as being read. So I'm just going to pull out the headline elements. So obviously it details the council's activity in preventing and detecting fraud and corruption throughout the last financial year. The first item is the National Fraud Initiative, which started in 2002, and it's to do with data that's been collected, data matching across various elements of all council and government, and that's done biannually with data matching that then gives us things to work through. The last time this was run for TNBC, there was 1,188, I believe, on Annex 2. We then move on to the Kent Intelligence Network, and the Kent Intelligence Network is run by Kent as well as other local borough and district councils. And it mainly looks at fraud and error within single person discount, small business rate relief, and unrated businesses and residential premises. And the following has been achieved in the last financial year. For single person discount matches have brought in at 75,000, single person discount reviews another 7, unrated businesses 47, and retriever debt tracing with recovery action is 267,000. I'll then move on to investigating fraud, bribery and corruption, and Annex 3 has got a breakdown of that. And there's 166 referrals were received in the last financial year. Majority of those involved DWP derived benefits, totaling 100 referrals. The second most reported type was single person discount of council tax, where that was 32. And again, that's shown in Annex 4. But out of those investigations, £33,000 was recovered, due to errors and fraud being discovered and then compliance activity taken. I move to, so the local implications still remain the same. So obviously the legal duty under section 151 of the Local Government Act is in place to ensure that appropriate systems to prevent and detect fraud, and obviously the services that the team carry out provide that. And also the Local Government Act of 72 gives the council the ability to investigate and prosecute offences committed against them, which again it gives us our powers to carry out what we do. Financial and value for money considerations. Obviously, the counter-fraud function helps to identify fraud and error that could have an adverse effect on the finances of the council. Fraud prevention and detection is an area subject to central government focus with initiatives such as the National Fraud Initiative, which I mentioned earlier, and local government counter-fraud and corruption initiatives. The message coming from these initiatives is that effective fraud prevention and detection releases resources and minimises losses to the council through fraud. Risk assessment, where the fraud element falls into this, is that failing to have an efficient and effective counter-fraud function could lead to an increased level of fraud. And this report summarises the work the counter-fraud function provides, and which is a key source of assurance for the council on the adequacy and effectiveness of its counter-fraud arrangements. And I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Kevin. Yes, very important area of work. Bethan.
I'm just curious about this in the Appendix 2, this report, the National Fraud Initiative. Yeah, as Kevin said, there's 1,188. Why have only 27 been processed, or is this a misleading figure?
Bear with me. So this obviously comes out. So when was this? The last time this was carried out was April 2025. So I haven't got the figures for the proof, because obviously it comes out twice a year. So I haven't got the figures for the previous occasion. So when that came out in April, at the time of this report going out, that was 27 that had been progressed. And invariably it's the ones which jump out. So for example, the fifth line down, 11 cases where housing benefit claimants to benefits for a deceased person. So that again, that's one that's picked out. But invariably the Kent Fraud Initiative is where we find the most value that can be added back to TNBC, i.e. clawing back error and fraud finances.
Thank you. Tim Bishop.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Going on this, I mean, you've got this on this this fraud, but no value for savings. Is it possible to have an estimated value of savings? Because we're looking at this and it just is zeros. Bit, with respect, a bit meaningless. Well, seems meaningless to me because I can't get a gist of what this could result in.
Sorry, in relation to which section?
Is this the National Fraud Initiative where you were talking about the ones that are opened? Colleague earlier said there's only sort of 7 opened. We've got the last column is savings, and it just says 0 in all of them. I mean, what I'm asking is it available to have the information that could be the potential savings?
Yeah, what I'll do is I'll have to take that away and feed that back, because unfortunately I don't have the answer to that this evening. But I will make sure that we get an answer to that. And going forward, when we bring this data, we'll make sure that we have those so that we don't have this crop up again.
Yep. Okay. Mark Hood.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, I've got a question about. Well, it links into that where you've got people claiming benefits, and then you find out that the person who they're claiming for is actually dead. Ties in with blue badge fraud. So blue badge fraud is quite heavily reported in by other councils across Kent. So last year there was 301 referrals of blue badge fraud, and in some places, Ashford Borough Council was 89 cases, Maidstone there were 59 cases, Swale 74. So quite often when these cases are reported, is it true that we actually find out that there's other fraud going on? So as well as they'll be using the blue badge for somebody who may have passed away, there's actually other fraud of the kinds that have been listed here happening as well. And it's hearing Tunbridge and Malling, we don't refer hardly any. I think it was only one last year, but it does seem that is quite a good way of highlighting fraud elsewhere. And yeah, I share the opinion that it would be great to see what the savings are, because we know that there's a huge amount of savings that are made from investigating this.
Thank you. Kevin, do you have any comments on the blue badge?
Yep. So there's a couple of elements there. Obviously, I've previously mentioned the NFI and that savings data. So again, I'll put another mark against it to ensure that comes back to you and is also sorted out for next committee. But on the blue badge, so in fact just today I was running the figures, and for Tunbridge and Malling, so 22-23 there was 7 referrals, 23-24 there was 9, 24-25 there was 2, and so far in this financial year there was 1. So I can't speak for the enforcement team. I can do some work with the enforcement team because that's something I do. So I can take that through the channels that I work with at TNBC to see if that's something that could prove beneficial. But in relation to the other element of the question as to what other fraud comes about, absolutely. Obviously, I can't, because it's open forum, so I can't say too much on too many things. But yes, we have had instances where what starts as blue badge fraud then expands into fraud such as social that's tapping into other social derived benefits that individual has been receiving, because unfortunately sometimes those that commit fraud, they commit it in all manner of ways, not just in blue badge, but blue badge tends to be the softer side. So yes, so if there was increase in reporting from Tunbridge and Malling enforcement team, that could lead to more in-depth fraud investigations, and see where that leads.
Thanks, Kevin. Any further questions? No. Okay, so let's move to the recommendation 3.1, where we're asked to note this internal audit and counter fraud progress report as a source of independent assurance regarding the risk control and governance environment across the council, noting the outcomes from previously reported 2024-25 internal audit and counter fraud work and activity, and the updates for the quarter 4 24-25. Also to note the resultant annual opinion of substantial for the year 2024-2025. I'll propose that, so can I have a seconder, please? Yep, Councillor Bethan Perry. Thank you. Okay, is that agreed? Thank you. That's all the items for recommendation this evening. So we're moving on to item 30, which is submitted for information, and it's the Grant Thornton Audit Progress Report and Sector Update. This report provides an update on the audit being undertaken on the financial statements for 2024-25 and updates emerging nationalist issues and developments identified by our external auditor, Grant Thornton. And I think tonight we have Sophia. Sophia.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. So I do have a progress report to present to you, and I will direct your attention to page 249 of the pack, just to give a summary of where we are. In terms of the work we have in the planning stage, that's drawn to a close and going through final reviews. But what it means is that I can let you know that the plan that we issued in April and presented at the last meeting, I can now finalise and there are no changes to that indicative plan that we presented. So we will take that as final now. There were no additional risks we identified in completing our planning work. We are now very much in the thick of our fieldwork stage, as Amanda mentioned in her presentation. The progress of the audit is going very well. And as Amanda said, we haven't found any significant points that we need to raise to you today. We will be bringing our audit findings report to the September meeting. And we are very much on track to issue that report and present it to the meeting on the 29th, along with the value for money work, so the auditor's annual report for 24-25 on the 29th, and very much planning to sign off the opinion after that meeting in line with the statutory deadline of the 30th of September. Going on in the progress report, I will just draw your attention probably to the logistics page on page 253, which sets out the timings of what I've just mentioned. The report then goes into the sector updates. So I will stop there and take any questions or any comments that members may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Sophia? No, doesn't look like there are, Sophia. So
thank you.
Yep. So as the report is noted. Thank you very much. Right. Item 14. Well, there's no urgent items, but I'm just going to make it. I just want to say actually, really to thank Sharon for her immense work over many years at this council. I mean, she's thanked her colleagues, but I think for their hard work, I think we should thank her for her exceedingly hard work. And certainly as chair of the Audit Committee, she's made my life a lot more straightforward and easier. So I'd certainly like to show our appreciation. Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Can I just say, I've really enjoyed working with everyone at the members. It's been a different experience to what some of my other colleagues around Kent experience, and where it's I would say a more fractious relationship in parts. I think we've always had a really good relationship here between officers and members. Of course, there's the odd issue here, but then we're all human, aren't we? But I have really enjoyed it, and thank you very much for your contributions, questions, and yeah, we are where we are today because of the working relationship that we have. So thank you.
Thank you. Right, the no urgent items, and item 15, exclusion of press and public, the no urgent items consideration in private. So at 10 to 9, I'd like to close this meeting. Thank you very much for coming tonight. Yes.